Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff Hahn, and I'm facilitating the Monday afternoon webinar series for Corwin Press. Welcome to The Right Drivers for Systematic Change, presented by Michael Fullan. Now I'd like to turn the meeting over to Nicole Franks, Marketing Manager for Corwin Press, to introduce today's presenter.
Thank you, Jeff. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to bring you a special treat this Monday. Michael Fullan is the former Dean of the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education at the University of Toronto. Corwin is proud of Fullan's work as a prolific award-winning author whose books have been published in many languages. His book, Leading in a Culture of Change, was awarded the 2002 Book of the Year Award by Learning Forward. Breakthrough won the 2006 Book of the Year Award from the American Association of Colleges for Teacher Education. Turnaround Leadership in Higher Education won the Bellwether Book Award in 2009, and Change Wars was awarded the 2009 Book of the Year Award by Learning Forward. Coherence is the latest bestseller from Fullan and co-author Joanne Quinn. In Coherence, Fullan and Quinn discuss the right drivers that help create positive school reform. The book takes a hard look at how to create collaborative school cultures and finishes with intentional steps to help leaders work for coherence by understanding the context and framework and developing leaders at all levels. Today, you'll learn about the coherence framework they've developed and get a sneak peek at how to put into action with the right drivers for systemic change. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Michael.
Okay, thank you very much, Nicole, and hello, good evening to everyone. I have a Halloween costume on, but you can't see it because it's only my voice, so you'll have to take my word for it. Let me lead into this topic, which is really focused and getting a lot of action now. The first thing I think to say about our work, and we have a team of about 10 of us, Joanne Quinn is my co-author, as Nicole said, is that what we do change in partnership with school districts or sometimes states. We then write a book about it, and then we do it better, and we write a better book, and it goes on that way. So it's practice chasing theory, if you like. It really is grounded in the practice. That's why I think our writing is specific, because a lot of it really is coming from the insights we get in working with teachers, principals, students recently on the students as agents of change. So that's just to make sure we understand it's very much grounded in what's already happening and what should happen. The second thing is that the background to this book is in 2011, I wrote an article called Choosing the Wrong Drivers for Whole System Reform. And this hit a responsive chord. A driver is a policy, and a wrong driver is a policy that doesn't work. Well, you might say, well, why do politicians keep using drivers that don't work? I don't think it's that mysterious, actually. I think partly because they can. Secondly, because they're in a hurry. They have less than 4 years. And thirdly, because the wrong drivers can be made to appeal, at least superficially, to the public. They sound good. So the wrong drivers we identified in 2011 were punitive accountability, and then a strong emphasis on individualism, which sounds like a bit of a subtle point, which it is, individuals as the solution. And the third one was technology, buy your way to the future, one could say. And the fourth one was ad hoc policies, fragmented policies. So we were working successfully in Ontario from 2004 onward. And so I wrote this article in 2011. And what was appearing as the right drivers, that is drivers that worked in combination, were capacity building. Secondly, teamwork or collaboration. Thirdly, pedagogy as the driver, not technology. And fourthly, system change or systemic change. And so that, as I said, really hit home with a lot of people. They knew it, they saw it, that it was accurate. And what we then were asked for, well, you said you've identified the problem, but what's the solution? And then Joanne and I worked on the book Coherence. And this is why we refer to it as the right drivers, because we spelled it out in detail what those were. And we got those from doing a lot of workshops in at the school and the district level, even the state level in Ontario, California, which I'll return to. So what I'd like to do, and I'll pause about halfway through this, and Jeff can coordinate some questions, is to just give you the basic framework that we developed. And you see this on the screen now. We are strong fans of what I call Simplexity. Obviously not a real word, but a handy concept. And Simplexity is when you take something that is complex and you boil it down to a small number of key things, 3, 4, 5, not more than 6. And that's the simple part, boiling it down. The complex part is how do you make them gel together in interaction. So you see we've got 4 big pieces, quadrants: focusing direction, cultivating collaborative cultures, deepening learning, and securing accountability, all kind of fueled by leadership. We define leadership quite broadly, including more recently students as agents of change. So that's the image, and we have, since we wrote the book, and we didn't have it this way, but as we've used this diagram, the analogy that's best, I think, fits here is the heart. The heart has 4 chambers. Blood is pumping in and out of those chambers, and if anything is blocked, if any one of the 4 chambers is blocked or defective, the person dies, in this case the organization dies. So I want you to think of this not as 1, 2, 3, 4, but as a pulsating phenomenon where these 4 things are interacting together. So I want to highlight a few pieces from each of these, and as I said, we'll probably pause halfway through this to interact with some questions and then build on it from there. So the focusing direction, purpose-driven, goals that have impact, clarity of strategy, change leadership, all very important pieces. And you can see that this is dynamic. It's not just putting the moral purpose down on paper. And I won't dwell on this, but I do want to pick up an interesting piece of it. And it's this, that you can't actually nail down the vision or the direction in quadrant 1, so to speak. You have to actually move to the interaction with people to flesh that out. But I want to take it in an interesting way and ask the rhetorical question, which I'll answer, is what's the relationship between passion and skills? Clearly, purpose, moral purpose is passion. And so when we think of passion and skills, I want to take it in both directions. So first question, is it possible to have too much passion? And odd question, but I hope you're already thinking of people, maybe even yourself, where you have too much passion, where you're too committed, where you burn out, where you run roughshod over others, where you don't listen so well because you're sure that we have to do this today for the students. So you're driven for good purpose, but as we say, passion without skills is dangerous. So what we are doing in the coherence framework is identifying the set of skills in combination that will be necessary for this to be effective. The second and more interesting part is what if you don't have passion? What if, and you can say, well, all teachers have passion, but actually that's not quite the case. If we were to ask teachers that can all students learn, almost all of them will say yes. But if you take some teachers in a situation where the kids have not been learning, in that situation, deep down, those teachers probably don't truly believe that those kids can learn more than they're learning. They couldn't believe that because it's not happening. And it's not that they would say it that way, but that's the reality. So my question here for number 1, and this is where I want to nail it down, what will make this more dynamic? What will change people's minds about that is worth doing? Let me start with 2 things that won't change their mind. One is research evidence. Here are some schools just like yours that are getting success, therefore you can do it. Research evidence doesn't carry the motivational. The second thing that doesn't work is increased moral exhortation. That is, we must do it for the good of the children, and that's obviously we want to say that, we want to pursue that, but it's not a motivational action proposition. The first one, more research evidence that backs it up, tells you that it can be done. The second one, increased moral exhortation, says it should be done, but neither of them say how to do it. And so our book is about how to get moving on it. And it's interesting to find out that what happens with people's passion is you actually have to pursue it through new behaviors and new momentum. Or to put it another way, people will get motivated not by the research evidence, not by the moral exhortation, but by new experiences with other people where something is working now that didn't work before, where students are more engaged, and therefore you've got a dilemma at the beginning, which is how do you activate this movement? And this is why we'll see collaboration is so important, because you activate it by working with other people who have similar, who have skills and are perhaps farther down the line. So I want you to think of focusing direction as very important. It's a point of departure. It's a preliminary vision. It's the initial direction. It certainly has the goals of impact, about raise the bar and close the gap, but it doesn't yet have the action component to get the movement. So we move then to change leadership. Change leadership is the bridge between quadrant 1 and quadrant 2. Clarity about goal is not sufficient. Leaders must develop a shared understanding in people's minds and collective action. If you think of the concept coherence, which is at the heart of our solution, we have said, accurately, we think, that coherence is fully and only subjective. Stop and think about that. Coherence is fully and only subjective. This means you can't get coherence from a workshop, you can't get it from a document, you can't get it from a meeting. There's only one way that you can get coherence in the sense of the shared subjective, and that is by interacting with people, doing something, and pulling out the meaning. And because our definition actually is a shared sense of coherence about the change process, or a shared depth of understanding about change, you can right away see what will work and what won't work. Shared, that means it's got to be interactive. Depth means it's got to be over time, working on deep learning, as we call it. And that understanding of what it is, you can't get it through professional development, although that can reinforce it. You can only get it by doing the work. We call it learning is the work. Then I want to tip into the change process itself. And you see on the screen our definition, again, Simplexity, very complex in some ways. Successful change processes are a function of shaping and reshaping good ideas, one idea, and they build capacity and ownership. So this is, if you have one without the other, you don't get change. So either one of those two, you can see right already that this is a little bit complex. Although it's not overwhelming, there's only two points to it. But let me use two practical examples. We get our best examples from practitioners. So one is slightly longer to explain, and the other one is brief. We worked in Australia a few years ago, in Canberra. The units of ACT teamed up with us, and we gave some help, but the success always comes from inside, but we facilitated it. And we were in the Canberra High School at the beginning, and they had just introduced a quality teacher framework. This is a framework based on inquiry and good teaching and feedback, and it's quite a good framework. But the day we were there, right at the beginning, the teachers said to us and to each other, we're not going to do this. We don't want people coming into our classroom observing what we're doing and telling us how to teach differently. So let's call this massive resistance, because it was. And then what the leadership did was much more sophisticated than just say rationally, here's the evidence, this works, please do it, etc. What they did was say, well, it's not quite mandatory. We want some people to try it. You don't have to take the advice anyways, we just want you to experience it. We'd like you to, the people that try it, to tell each other and others about their experience. We did this very kind of soft beginning. We call it go slow to go fast in the change process. And it had some good merit, and people sort of caught on. And when we were there in year 3, and I'll get to the point in a moment here with a very good change insight. And when we got to the 3rd year, we were doing filming in the school, actually, 100% of the teachers participated in the quality teacher framework, in the coaching. and peer observation coaching. And the excitement of teaching and learning had increased in the school. There was a lot of students were engaged, a lot of the culture was really energized, and they were getting good results. You could see it, and they were actually starting to affect the dropout rate. But we looked at that, and we're quite impressed, given my insights about the change process, my commitment to understanding it. So at the end of that day, I sat down with the deputy principal who was in charge of that program, that initiative. And I said to him, this is quite amazing. You had already at the beginning very strong resistance, and now 3 years later, everybody's engaged, and it's mostly the same people. So I said, here's the killer change question. That's this. I said, is this participation, is it mandatory or voluntary? And without hesitation, he said, it's voluntary but inevitable. Just want you to think about that for a moment. Voluntary but inevitable. That's what that definition means. Yeah, you shape and reshape, you have interpretation, but the process of the quality of what the idea is and the opportunity to sort out and develop the capacity to decide whether it's good starts to really take effect. So you get a lot of large change happening because you end up as much. Retired 5 years ago, 4 years ago, and he was asked, excuse me, he was asked in an interview, they said, what's the most important thing you've learned about leadership? Because you have to be successful. And he said it this way, without hesitation. He said, the most important thing I've learned is that it's crucial to be right at the end of the meeting, not at the beginning of the meeting. That's a metaphor. And I think it's fantastic, actually. If you're right at the beginning of the meeting, you're right in your own mind. If you're right at the end of the meeting, you processed it through this definition, really, and that's what he was referring to. So the third point, and the securing accountability. Cultivating collaborative cultures. Very clearly, the winner, as John Hattie calls it, as we now call it, that the culture that's collaborative and is focused, and it really is on the agenda. And this is hard to sort out, and it's very important to sort it out precisely. We don't mean just collaboration and you're going to win. We don't mean PLC and it's game over. We mean a specific collaborative culture which zeroes in on precise pedagogy, which has data and evidence, which we'll come back to under securing accountability, of solutions, which is very strongly based on improved pedagogy. So I could give you a long history of 30 or 40 years on the research on collaboration, but I won't. I'll give you the Reader's Digest version, which is, we've known for a long time that collaborative cultures work, and they work to increase the effectiveness of the organization. But it's also the case that there are a lot of forms of collaboration that don't work. What Andy Hargraves and myself working on professional capital have called contrived collegiality, or administrative collegiality, or balkanization, which subgroups get collaborative but they fight against each other. So it's become clear in our work in Coherence, in the book, is very precise about this, that it's a collaborative culture that has an attitude of growth, that has leaders that facilitate, use the group to change the group, that zeroes in on capacity building about pedagogy and use of evidence. And so that this combination of things really starts to make things much more effective. And I wanted to just give you one footnote here. I mentioned John Hattie. His work on visible learning, which has been very powerful, was based initially on the individual pedagogical practices, instructional practices of teachers. And he began to, he had his 800 plus now, well over 1,000 examples of and effect sizes that showing some things were negative, actually negatively affected learning, and others that went up to, let's say, an effect size of 1.40. So about 5 years ago, when we began to talk with John about these findings, we said, well, what about collaborative cultures? We happen to know that when they're done well, they can be highly effective, and your data is about individual practices. So he agreed to take a look at the data, the evidence, and he has now an evidence base that is not as strong as the others because it's only recently developed, but it's pretty clear. He says, and I recommend that you take a look at his Pearson paper that's called The Politics of Collective Efficacy. The Politics of Collective Efficacy. And in it, he shows the data, and he says the new winner in effect sizes is collaborative cultures. So I want to establish this, and you have to read the book and look at it in detail to get to it, that this is about very specific, half a dozen characteristics, that the principal, for example, as leader is key, but only as lead learner, which means that the principal has to be a learner as well as a leader, has to set up a culture of growth and development, has to establish trust and transparency, has to agree that people should be able to try things and get better at it, and then pin it to Vivian Robinson's main finding on effect sizes of principles and school achievement. She says it succinctly in a very precise and powerful way, where she says the biggest difference a principal can make is related to, and here I'm going to quote her, the degree to which the principal participates as a learner with teachers in moving the schools forward. So this collaborative culture, I think, is really critical, and in it, the lead learner competencies in this, I'm talking about principals here, but we can also say teacher leaders or district for that matter, is that they model learning. That is to say, they take the Vivian Robinson findings seriously. I'm going to work with you and participate as a learner. I'm going to learn more at the beginning than I'm going to lead. But once we get into it, I'll learn a lot better, and after 3 or 4 years, I'll be able to lead learning and shape the culture, and I'm maximizing impact. We agree with John Hattie, and our own work reflects this. The third bullet here, maximize impact on learning. Know thy impact, as John calls it, is that we always are, in our work, are insisting on the link to impact, not because we believe in external accountability, which I'll come to later, but because we believe that the specificity, the causal pathway to measurable impact and outcomes is essential for the internal culture to do. And if it doesn't do that, you can't claim any success. So Jeff, I'm going to stop there, and I think you'd probably be tracking questions. We'll take a pause and see what questions, comments are coming, have maybe a 10-minute interaction, and then I'll proceed to the other parts. So Jeff, are you collecting?
Yes, hi, Michael. I have not received any questions as of yet. I've asked people to send them to the chat function. If anybody has any questions, please send them to me right now through the chat function, and we will discuss them.
Okay, well, I'm going to proceed, and Jeff, feel free to interrupt me if you see some things coming in, so that we
Sounds
can.
good. I will do that.
Okay, good. So the parts that we pull together, I'm going to come to deep learning and the securing accountability in a moment to fix it. We have the Coherence Book, which, as you see on the screen, we've been able to marshal this coming from the field and give lots of examples around the 4 quadrants. And then because a lot of people were asking, well, give us more guidance on how to use this, we added a workshop book called TAG, you could call it TAG, Taking Action Guide, that systematically aligns it and has good things to say about how to even go further in depth into it. But let me go to the last 2 quadrants, which are in the basic diagram, and I'm just going to go back to these part, deepening learning and securing accountability. Deepening learning, there's so much to say about this, and we will be we are working with Corwin to publish additional work in this area, but I want to position it because it's the next phase. It's very very powerful. And it goes like this, and I'll be specific about it. The push factor is that traditional schooling is incredibly boring for students. The data, whether you go to Lee Jenkins or Russ Clelia with students, show the same thing, that students start with a reasonable degree of enthusiasm in the early kindergarten, grade 1, 2, 3, and then it gradually goes down to by grade 9. There's not much more than a third of the students that are deeply engaged, even those that are doing well. So I'm going to call that a push factor. I don't want to dwell on the negative. The more interesting is the pull factor, which is that new developments in pedagogy, really, and in the technology that go with it, are offering powerful learning opportunities. And I could give a whole session on this, but I want to give you the succinct version, which is to say we have zeroed in on this under the concept of NPDL, so new pedagogies for deep learning. The NP part is the new learning partnership between and among students, teachers, and families. So this is democratizing the learning partnership, if you like. Students have a lot more say in their learning, that it's grounded in their own goals and activities. And we have lots of examples. It's an inquiry-based cycle of learning and participation. But it also focuses on real-life problems. This is far more than project-based learning. It includes that, but it's really the whole curriculum. And so we've tied it to a new set of learning outcomes, which are the 6 C's, we call them. So they are, you can look this up, the website on this is npdl.global. So npdl.global. I've also published this in a short book with Corwin that came out after Coherence that's called Indelible Leadership. Always leave them learning. So you can a detour to the Corwin site and look at this short. It's the Leadership Impact Series, so it's only about 70 pages, but it captures the new work. And the 6 C's are character education, citizenship, collaboration, communication, creativity, and critical thinking. To recognize 4 of those are the typical 21st century learning skills, and they really haven't gone very far until recently. And we've added character education and citizenship, and it's made it become very powerful. And in so doing, in the new pedagogies part, we've begun to see that these that the implementation, and we're working with almost 1,000 schools now in 7 different countries. I won't name all the countries, but Australia, Canada, U.S., even Uruguay, and South America. These are countries. Finland, who does well but wants to do better. So these, sounds brand new, and in some ways it is brand new, but it's quite consistent with the new curriculum and new visions that are coming out of the what people want to accomplish. Basically, they want to accomplish a learning experience which prepares students for the 21st century, prepares them today for today, prepares citizens of tomorrow for today, if you like. So this is real-time development of citizens, and we have a lot of examples of this, including some incredibly interesting ones of students as change agents. Students, very young ones, as young as, I'd say, age 7, influencing and changing pedagogy, changing the learning environment in cooperation with teachers and the school and the district, and even changing society. But I'm going to take the learning environment in pedagogy. One of the schools that we relate to is, the name of the school is John A. Leslie. It's in Toronto, east end of Toronto, has about 65% Bangladesh students. And in this very poor, high poverty, really, the parents want the best for their kids, but they're starting with almost nothing. And I could tell you a whole story, but I just want to give you one vignette that makes the point. One day, the principal, whose name is Greg McLeod, came into his office, and on his desk was an iPad, and there was a sticky on the top of it, on the screen, and the sticky said, "Play me." So he put it on, and what was in it was a video from the grade 1 students, that is 7-year-olds, the grade 1 students talking to Greg about, and to teachers, about how their learning environment, this is the phrase they use, could be changed so that was more engaging and more participatory, more group work. Obviously, they had been developed in that role, but here they were showing initiative, saying, we have ideas, ask us, let us think about how we change these, and we'll do this together. So this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a whole set of things I'm going to say. We are measuring these global competencies, these 6 Cs. They are compatible with the best of the new curriculum and CCSS and beyond, if you like. And global competencies, we're relating to the OECD, which is the big Paris-based organization that does the PISA results assessments, and they're very interested in new measures, and these new measures are the 6 Cs. So we're working with these 1,000 schools, we're sharing a lot, we're learning a lot. It's about deepening learning in 2 senses: deepen the pedagogy and deepen the learning outcomes. They go together. So the last part I want to tie in here is the securing accountability. And this is kind of, to us, very interesting. We think we have a good handle on it. We distinguish in the book between internal and external accountability. And Richard Elmore from Harvard said it best, I think, about 12 years ago. He said, no amount of external accountability will be effective in the absence of internal accountability. And a better word for internal accountability is individual and collective responsibility. So accountability has a lot of baggage. Let's use the word responsibility. And what's interesting here for us is, we, as you recall, around the wrong drivers, the first wrong driver was punitive accountability. Accountability is heavily laden with tests, assessments, always, in your face kind of about progress, taking action against schools that don't do well, against teachers that don't do well. And obviously that, as I spelled out in the choosing the wrong drivers, is not a motivator to make change. It doesn't tell you how to do it, plus it annoys you that you're being criticized when you're giving your all to try to make some changes or make some impact. So you can't, the first thing to say is, you can't replace bad accountability with no accountability. It shouldn't be acceptable to anybody. It certainly won't be acceptable to parents, the public, the media. So the question is, what is good accountability? And we think we have nailed it, I have to say, that in this sense, good accountability is when the group takes responsibility. We have lots of examples of this. And in fact, the good districts that we work with in Ontario, in California, have for the last 15 years, even before the new ideas came along, the good districts, that is the successful ones, were really pursuing a focus on effective responsibility and accountability internal to their systems because they wanted to make a difference. And I want to put it this way, that you want to have this form of accountability even if there was no external requirement to do it, because you want to make a difference. This is the moral purpose, tying it back to that. So I want to think of securing accountability. In fact, one thing we have done in our workshops recently is we've hijacked, if you like, the internal accountability in quadrant 4 back into the collaborative cultures quadrant, because it's part and parcel of improvement. So that's saying it a little bit mysteriously, but let me put it this way. When you have a collaborative culture, when it zeroes in on precise pedagogy for improvement, when it links it causally to impact on measurable student outcomes, where those outcomes are important for the 21st century, when you do all of that, you increase your political and professional, I'm talking accountability now. So let's talk about professional power first and then political. Professional power is when you know what you're doing. When it's what we, Andy Hartnett and I talked about in professional capital. It's a combination of human capital, quality of the individuals, social capital, the quality of the group, and then very importantly for accountability, decisional capital, which is using evidence to make changes and to show you're making progress. So this sounds like accountability, but actually it's good collective collaborative cultures. It's collective efficacy in John Hattie's terms. So when you think of it this way, I'm still sticking with what I call the professional power. The professional power is you know what you're doing, and you're getting results, and you have those results to show. And every time anybody wants to talk about them internally, the parents, the media, the hierarchy, you are able to, in a professional way, articulate what it is you're accomplishing. And the main purpose, of course, is the internal success. But the other byproduct of it is you're actually quite successful externally, professionally, if you can show results and know what you're talking about. So that's what I would call the professional power. It also means that you are articulate. Let me use the phrase assessment literate. Assessment literate, not literacy assessment, but assessment literate is when you know how to use data, when you can hold your own in a bad argument, when you can articulate the impact that you've had. So that's the professional side. The political side is you're empowered. You're empowered professionally, but you're also empowered because of the community, because you have success, because you're able to relate to groups on that basis. So we think this is the new solution, and we certainly have developed a lot of this in Ontario, but almost from the beginning, we began to interact with other jurisdictions, especially those that said we want to move to the new drivers. And the big example, and I'll close with this, and we'll see what kind of Q&A we have or comments and questions in the chat, is that California, our team is working at all levels of California system. Governor, state board, state superintendent, CDE, which is the state department, the county offices, 58 of them, the districts, 1,009 of them, clusters of districts working on this, what we call leadership from the middle. And although it's fairly complex, although it's only about 2 years, 2.5 years old, it is the case, and this is, I'm quoting here, is that almost everybody that are at all of these levels in California, educators and policymakers, will say literally, we are choosing the right drivers. They will say literally, we're moving from compliance to capacity building. Now, whether they can pull this off in a big system is another question, but the momentum is there. The complexities of how to do it are obviously, we're in the middle of it, they're in the middle of it. But this gives me great hope because now we have a whole system, a big system, 43 million people in the state that are saying, we want to get on the right track here. So we've been able to do it with districts, quite a few, large number of districts, but the more interesting phenomenon is what could happen if an entire state or province or country would actually pursue this. So I'll close here with now a re-reference to complexity and simplexity. And simplexity is this notion that we've got right before us, a reasonably accessible, coherent solution. It's complex in putting it into practice, but people are going for it, and as they make progress, they get better at it, they share with it. We call it leadership from the middle. Leadership from the middle is you start to learn from other districts and other people doing this work. So, and that you, let me conclude with that part because it's fairly important when we think about it. The top can't bring about change by itself. Site-based management doesn't work because it's too fragmented. So where's the glue? The glue is in the middle. The middle are the districts, for example. So if within a district, we would call the schools the middle, but that's the shifting the term of reference. If the middle gets stronger, and this is how I would describe the role of the middle, is that they are not in the business of implementing government policy. They're in the business of exploiting it. They become consumers for the local implementation, and in so doing, they get more success. They become better partners upwards to the state, if you like, and they become better partners with their schools and communities. So this is not theory. I mean, it's theoretical in explanation. This is what people are doing in a lot of different places, and we're excited about the next 2 or 3 years because this has huge leverage. When you tie it into deep learning, it goes even more. It has more profound changes that we're just beginning to uncover. So I'd be very interested in hearing from people, key questions, and certainly follow up from this seminar about the work we're doing in a lot of different jurisdictions. Thanks very much.
Hi, Michael. It's Jeff again, and I do have some questions for you.
Good.
So from John Souza, starting fresh, How long does it take to establish a collaborative culture, trust in leader?
That's a great question, and we are very precisely interested in the acceleration of change, that is the speed of change. And so I'm talking, I have in mind here now particular districts. I can think of one district that was in terrible shape, you know, really bad to begin with, coming up from the graveyard, to use a Halloween analogy tonight. And so here's the answer. First principle, go slow to go fast. That means you have to work initially on trust and relationship building and get a little bit of that. You can only prove it by doing it, but you have to say it up front. We say name it, model it, and monitor it. And then you start to do the things about pedagogy. It has to be not just collaboration, that's amorphous. It has to be about pedagogy linked to actual goals and outcomes. The precise answer to the question is that year one, building relationships. Year two, it starts to kick in. Year three, you get results. That's not a long time. It's less than 36 months, actually. So this is, I have in my particular districts, I won't name them on this task, but definitely this is an accelerated proposition that we're talking about. It's not like just, you know, hopefully it will work out. One caution, though, if you don't do collaboration with precision, if you do it vaguely or too generally, like a PLC that doesn't really zero in on pedagogy, you won't get it done in any number of years.
Another question from Sherry McLary, and she writes, you mentioned passion and skills are both needed in the coherence framework. According to Gordon Allport, cardinal behaviors of passion guide behavior based on the situational circumstances. In the focusing direction portion of the framework, how important is the situational aspect and the ability for the leader to be able to be impersonal or objective in order to have impact?
Well, I wouldn't say impersonal in that respect, but certainly the question that I raised about passion and skills is how do you activate passion if it's not there? And so I want to return to that because it's a key point. If you're working with some people that don't have passion and you think they should have it, you can't get it by urging them to have passion. There's no strategy there. You can't say to someone who doesn't have passion, be passionate. They have nowhere to go with that. But you can give them experiences that they haven't had before that ignite their passion. And all teachers, I think, have probably a passion that got burnt out or that it never really got activated deeply enough. All humans actually want to make a difference. The vast majority of humans want to make a difference in the lives of others. I think the situational part is key because the passion has been in relation to the starting point. But the way to activate it is, yes, size up the situation. If it's a terrible toxic culture, like the example I used a few minutes ago, then you need really more immediate moves and kind of urgent moves, even though there's still a bit of a building relationships. If it's the opposite of that, if it's a school district which is doing all right, is too complacent, we call it the cruising district, that's a different problem because people don't know where because they have average scores. So every situation needs improvement. Is to try to pinpoint what are other people in similar circumstances doing that are better than us, and if there's a crime or there's a steady development that has to occur, but giving people new experiences, linking with others who know more about it, leveraging it forward, and literally activating the passion there, because the skill development and the passion development need to go hand in hand.
Terrific. I have another question from John. How does trust factor into the coherence framework?
Trust is absolutely key to it, and so this is a very good question, of course, in the sense that the big question is, how do you get trust if you don't have it? we know it's critical, and here's how I want to think about it. Trust, you don't get trust by saying to someone, please trust me. That's not going to be very convincing. Our rule of thumb about this is you name it, you model it, and you monitor it. So the leader, principal of the school, I've particular schools in mind, says, we are going to build a climate of trust here. Says that at the outset. Climate of trust means we can try things, and if we make mistakes, it's okay as long as we learn from them. So failure is okay in the course of improvement. And I'm going to model that myself as principal. And you watch me, and I'll be that. I want you to be like that. So the principal has to work very hard in that case, the leader, on building a climate of trust. People will not accept trust. And I think, Stephen Covey said a long time, you cannot talk your way to situations you behave your way into. So I'm going to flip that around and say, you can't talk your way into trust. You have to behave your way into trust. So trust is a result of what you've done to prove you're trustworthy. And trustworthy has two pieces. One is integrity, one is skills. Skills can be accomplished in things we haven't accomplished before. And you have to prove that trust. And the climate of trust, once it gets built, it becomes a powerful resource. And then it's a resource for the next phase. But you have to earn your way through to trust, and then you leverage it after that. There's no shortcut.
Terrific, thank you. I have a question from Artis. Have you encountered resistance due to the fear of change or union structures in the United States?
Well, I would say that certainly in California, where we're involved massively, I want to say it that way, is that the biggest problem has not been resistance, and I'll come to Arna's question in a moment, but it's a question of how do we do this. So in other words, we don't know where to start. What's the know-how here? And this is where capacity building comes into play. And I'll put it this way, most people read Coherence and say, yes, this is our agenda, but how in the hell do we do it? And so that's the biggest obstacle is know-how. Then on the resistance side, unions were mentioned, but I want to put this in perspective here. When people tell me that, well, unions are the problem, we have to, or teachers who aren't very effective, we have to do something about that. And then I'm thinking about a union leader who says, well, yeah, we'll work on that when you get rid of your horrible bosses. So I think it's, the equation here has to be reciprocal. We have to get better leadership as well. And yes, we've had, there's been unions. One can say that unions have developed in some ways, according to the way they've been treated in the last 10, 15 years, according to the way teachers have been treated. So you almost could say this way, you get the unions you deserve. And the way to break through that, and California has some good examples on the move where union leaders are saying, we want to jointly be part of a new scenario. And now when I think of school districts, I could name 6 right now that have had success. Every one of them have figured out how to relate to the local union. They've taken it as something that they have to solve. They haven't just said, well, the union, we're just going to bypass them. They've figured out how to do that. They've invested into it. So again, I could name 6 districts that have done that. You could say, well, they're lucky. Well, they're not lucky. It's not a fluke. They did it by doing it, by focusing on it, by making it a priority, and by changing the relationships towards a greater set of conditions for trust. In the short run, there can be a lot of frustration because the leader can be well-intentioned, and unions might be showing resistance out of past circumstances. So that's very frustrating when you're in a hurry to have a moral impact, but that's part of the scenario of being a good change leader.
Thank you. Michael, I have one last question from John. Do you consider the middle being the school principals?
Is that the question?
Yes, that is the question.
Okay, yeah. So if you take it depends on the terms of reference of how big of a system we're talking about. So when we think of a state or a province, we think of the middle as the district. And how do you get districts stronger individually? And a lot of our examples in California are districts learning from each other, so clusters of districts. Similarly, within a district, you can think of the principals at the middle. So now we've got, the central office, the individual school principals, and the community. So in that sense, and when we say strengthen the middle, I want to say it in 3 ways. Let's stick with principals. One is that the principal gets stronger as an intra-school leader, building collaborative cultures within the school. That's one way. The second is the principal is more inclined to be part of networks of other schools learning from each other laterally. So the inter-school learning increases, and I'm now talking about particular strategies. And the third is that they become better partners upward to the district. So it's a 2-way street between the district and that. So it's a whole system change. And those are 3 pieces, and I'm not saying one should, you do them all at once. They don't all click in, but you should have in mind that that's what you're working on. We say principals need to be system players in a system, and so do others, but a system player is not a complex concept, although it's hard to pull off. What it means is that I do my work and I'm making it now conscious, and it's my responsibility to get the bigger picture.
Terrific. I have one last question that came in. How can this be applied to cultures where political power is confused for leadership and such leaders are leading in a direction which is less than optimal?
Well, I would say constructive rebellion. That is to say, if the leader is really out to lunch, I'm going to use that phrase, is using the wrong drivers, is trying to impose things that don't work, then I wouldn't say you confront it. A lot of our leaders who were successful when there were bad times, that is, when the hierarchy was pursuing bad policies, they worked under the radar. They didn't brag about things. They just worked away at getting things done and didn't worry so much about what the center thought of it. So I would say if you're in a bad situation, you while away your time, you do good things. I mentioned professional and political power at the school level or the district level, and you're your own person. I've said it this way as well in the book, is that you may be stuck with the policies or the leadership style of the hierarchy, but you're not stuck with their mindset. You can have your own mindset, and if the mindset of the leader is towards the wrong drivers, then you have to protect yourself by creating a collaborative culture. If you're successful, you gain political power as well as professional power.
Thank you. And you're spurring a lot of conversation. I have 2 more questions that just came in. So how do passionate teachers reach out to leadership who do not walk the talk of co-learning and collaborative learning in the school?
Well, I think there's 2 things. One is they can reach out to their colleagues within the school and outside the school. So I'm talking about teachers working with other teachers, and most principals would appreciate that, kind of the initiative at that level. The second thing is that maybe the leader is not a co-learner, but maybe they're also amenable to changing. So I wouldn't rule that out. That is, their people have changed under different circumstances. Then the third is maybe you have to while away your time, or you have to put in your time. If the leader is ineffective, hopefully they don't get in your way too much. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but maybe it's neutralized. But I still put on my emphasis that maybe they'll change. In the meantime, when we do our work with districts, we're saying change the leaders. Have a new job description for the principal. That's a co-learner. Change the criteria for promotion to the principalship, so there are more of you. If there are 20 principals and you have 8 that are doing the good thing, and you have 6 more that you're able to appoint in the next 2 to 3 years, you've got a majority. So you have to work away in this direction. You have to know the direction you're going in.
Thank you, and I want to thank Jillian for that question. I have another question for you. Are democratic schools the future,
That's one way of putting it, but I would, the democracy is around the learning, not around just the decision making. So when we've started to flesh out, and you see a little bit of it in the book, Indelible Leadership, if you look at the chapter on students as change agents, that the democracy part is that learners become more liberated to be learners individually and with each other, students and students to students, students and teachers, teacher to teacher, school to school. So the democratization of pedagogy is the essence.
Thank you. And that was from Kat. And Kat has one last question. And how do we shift schools into this new paradigm?
Well, you can, if there are leaders who want to do it, in our own case, NPTL, we have leaders and in some ways state leaders. Leaders want to do it, they're in a position, so they do it collectively. That's one way. The other way is if the leadership is inclined, you can participate. There's a lot of teacher-to-teacher collaboration. You can link into our NPDL, our deep pedagogies work. There's no excuse for an individual teacher not to move towards collaboration. Maybe they don't find it in their school and system, but they can find it in a linkage to the outside. It can be productive. It can be valuable in terms of the impact they make and the reputation they have. So you have to be proactive inside as well as outside the school.
Perfect. And people said thank you very much for a great presentation. That came through quite a few times over the last couple of minutes. And with that, that brings us to the end of the questions, Michael.
Good, that's great. Thanks. Great questions. I always get challenged by them.
Okay, well, I guess it's time to wrap up. Thank you so much, Michael, and thank you to everyone who participated in the discussion. You can learn more about the right drivers for systemic change and coherence in the companion volume, The Taking Action Guide to Building Coherence in Schools, Districts, and Systems. As a special thank you for attending today's webinar, we're offering a 20% discount when you use the discount code E16B86. We'll be sending that out with the recording of the webinar to everyone who registered to attend. We hope you'll join us for next week's webinar with Gary Howard on deepening your equity impact. Thank you all for attending Corwin's Monday afternoon webinar. Good night.
Thanks, everybody.